Since its release in 1997, Mortal Kombat Annihilation's place in the annals of video game history has calcified into a cautionary tale for what not to do. But there have been a lot of video game movies since then, and as someone who's pretty much witnessed the entire arc of how these things have been handled and mishandled by Hollywood, I've gotta say, what Annihilation lacks in quality, it does compensate for with the right instincts for building out a prototypical cinematic universe as we use the term today. Instincts which the just-released Mortal Kombat II largely share. I'm Tom Jorgensen, and here's why Mortal Kombat Annihilation sucked so that Mortal Kombat 2 could rule.
This is not a fight we can win here.
Annihilation!
Hollywood spent much of the 1990s workshopping how best to transmute the passion of gamers into box office bucks, and to what degree faithfulness to a game's mythology was a help and not a hindrance to good cinematic storytelling. Pretty much anyone currently old enough to drive has borne witness to at least part of an epoch of video game movie adaptations which were figuring some stuff out. But I'd cock one hell of an eyebrow at anyone who tried to argue that the prospects of any given video game adaptation haven't gotten dramatically better over time, to the point where now studios are looking to gaming IP as the next big wave of inspiration for blockbuster movie making. Let's do some quick stage setting of what the video game movie landscape of 1997 was like. And it will be quick, because there had just been 3 attempts at adapting a game as a film up to that point. 1993's Super Mario Bros. Proved an expensive, tonally challenging first stab that left kids wondering where all their colorful Mario friends were, and adults wondering how much of that hash brownie they really should have eaten before heading out for the night. With a way smaller budget and far less idea of how to dramatize a game, 1994's Double Dragon was even more of a creative and box office bomb. But in December that year, Street Fighter shoryokened its way to a much stronger showing on both counts. The Stephen E. D'Souza directed movie, the first draft script of which, legend has it, was written in one night, faithfully translated the series' colorful characters, if maybe not the 1v1 fights, and nearly cracked $100 million at the box office.
Come here prepared to fight a madman, and instead you found a god?
That suggested there was still money on the table for a studio that could find the right franchise to retool for general audiences. And New Line Cinema chose their fighter well with Mortal Kombat. By that point in the early 90s, Mortal Kombat was defining gaming's place not just in pop culture, but in the fabric of American life.
Mortal Kombat on Sega Genesis is the best video game ever.
I disagree. It's a very good game, but I think Donkey Kong is the best game ever.
Donkey Kong sucks.
You know something? You suck.
Forget about the fact that the hyper-violent fighter was really good and absolutely destroying records at the arcades. It was giving lawmakers a bright, bloody scapegoat on which to blame real-world violence, leaving developer Midway, and by extension the entire industry, in the sights of regulatory authorities which aimed to put restrictions on what could be portrayed in a video game in 1993.
Instead of enriching a child's mind, these games teach a child to enjoy inflicting torture.
But it's still a free country, so the compromise was the creation of the ESRB, the organization that puts that little letter in the corner of your game's box to tell you what level of objectionable content one should expect therein. And please excuse my millennial tendency to assume your game came with a physical box, I do come by it honestly. All of that controversy bred 2 things for Mortal Kombat as a franchise. For gamers, a clear rallying point around which to extol the creative freedoms of video games as an art form. And for general audiences, the elevation of Mortal Kombat to household name status. Midway had become the Bonnie Raitt of the industry. It sure was giving people something to talk about. Most crucially here, movie executives like Lawrence Kasanoff, who optioned the franchise in 1993. The next year, up-and-coming director Paul W.S. Anderson was chosen to helm Mortal Kombat based on the success of his indie debut, Shopping. With involvement from Mortal Kombat's creators, a reasonable budget, and its simple martial arts tournament narrative hook, what resulted was a $122 million smash at the global box office, giving audiences around the world a colorful, crunchy dose of escapism and handily snatching the title for highest-grossing video game adaptation up to that point. And so, as development on Mortal Kombat Annihilation began, Lawrence Kasanoff mandated that more was to be the guiding ethos of the sequel, as it had been with so many sequels before. That's not always the right instinct, but in Annihilation's case, there was so much mythology yet untapped, even with just the first 3 Mortal Kombat games out there to pull inspiration from, and audiences had seemed very receptive to the fantasy world and larger-than-life archetypal heroes and villains that populated it. Unfortunately for Mortal Kombat Annihilation's prospects, a lot of the folks who made the first movie special were interested in pursuing other projects, leaving Robin Shou and Talisa Soto as the only returning actors, reprising their roles of Liu Kang and Kitana respectively. But the true death knell for Mortal Kombat Annihilation was the exit of Paul W.S. Anderson. Anderson's style and sensibilities were a great match for Mortal Kombat's scope, but he chose to pass on directing the film. In fairness to Anderson though, the movie he chose to make instead was Event Horizon, which, like the first Mortal Kombat movie, has gone on to enjoy true cult status as a 90s genre favorite. John R. Leonetti, the first movie's cinematographer, was chosen to direct Annihilation shortly thereafter, a choice which made some sense when taken in the context with the breakneck pace of Annihilation's development. Hire a key creative who spent every day working in close collaboration with the director and hope some of that magic rubbed off onto them. It was, however, Leonetti's first time directing, and that's a big ask of anybody, especially on a martial arts film with an outsized reliance on visual effects, each of which are specialty disciplines in filmmaking and either of which would give any first-time director a lot to have to deal with. Mortal Kombat Annihilation picks up right where the first movie left off. After defeating the sorcerer Shang Tsung and winning Mortal Kombat, the heroes of Earthrealm return to the Temple of Light to celebrate and hug it out, only for Shao Kahn, the Emperor of Outworld, to show up on their doorstep with a cadre of his colorful and weird generals, all from the recently released Mortal Kombat III game: Motaro, Ermac, Smoke, Shiva, and Sindel. Motaro. What if a man was also a horse? And what if that man-horse was also a martial artist? Look, none of these spirit Halloween freaks have gone down in cinematic history as super memorable characters. I know that because that's not Smoke, it's Rain, and I'm willing to bet you didn't immediately clock that. But what a movie chooses to do in its opening minutes is an important statement of intent for what's to follow, and leading off with these various and sundry ninjas and humanoid outworlders doing their little poses at least suggests a world in which disparate races like Magic Ninja, Arms Lady, and Man Horse could be compelled, whether by ambition or fear, to serve a villain like Shao Kahn. Shao Kahn breaks the rules of Mortal Kombat, which dictate that Earthrealm should be safe from incursions from Outworld for having won the tournament, by killing Johnny Cage and promising to return in 6 days to put the rest of the human race under his boot. The rest of the movie follows the hero's attempts to prepare for lowercase a Annihilation, seeking help from new allies like Jax Briggs and Nightwolf, and their inclusion reveals even more shades of this weird world, such as the existence of cyber ninjas like Cyrax and Smoke. Yes, Smoke is in the movie, he's just a robot. And the mystical power of animality, which seems to be the key to defeating Shao Kahn. Raiden, meanwhile, entreats the Elder Gods, the deities who rule all of the realms, to intervene in Shao Kahn's plot. The aforementioned wave of recasting that crashed into Mortal Kombat Annihilation is mostly a negative, but with no disrespect to Christopher Lambert, it did yield one improvement. James Remar took on the role of Raiden, the God of Lightning and Earthrealm's team captain, and he's a lovely, warm presence in the film.
It's not about blame. We're together in this. Each of us must help and support the others, like a family. What's the deal with your arms?
Remar actually channels Raiden's affection for the human race really well, a critical aspect of the character that Lambert's steelier performance doesn't really leave room for.
Why didn't you protect him?
Why didn't you?
In a break from canon, we discover over the course of the movie that Shao Kahn and Raiden are not only brothers, but the sons of Shinnok, one of the Elder Gods who's secretly facilitating his son's attack on Earthrealm to grab power from the rest of the Elder Gods. All of these instincts on the filmmaker's part to go bigger on the mythology in Annihilation are correct, even if schlocky embellishments like Raiden being the runt of Shinnok's litter are a little perplexing. Unlike franchises such as the Christopher Reeve-led Superman, which leaned harder into invention in its later sequels to disastrous effect, an earnest effort to more fully represent the creations of Ed Boon and John Tobias on screen feels like an olive branch to gamers. And because the filmmakers had a chance to totally retool the approach going into the sequel, that feels well-intentioned. But as so often happens when the realities of filmmaking crash against good storytelling, The scope of the spectacle in Mortal Kombat Annihilation required was just not possible with the visual effects available at the time. The mid to late 90s were a trial by fire time for computer-generated imagery after James Cameron and Steven Spielberg threw the gauntlet down with Terminator 2 Judgment Day and Jurassic Park respectively. Studios were trying to match that same level of visual grandeur on significantly lower budgets, and overall, that wasn't going great. As the heroes of Earthrealm travel deeper into Outworld, Mortal Kombat Annihilation's plot begins to rely more and more on visual effects to the point of cascading disaster. Liu Kang is encouraged by Nightwolf to find his animality in order to defeat Shao Kahn, which resolves in a final fight between the two, which goes for broke by having them each turn into martial arts dragons. Martial arts dragons that look like this. I'm willing to defend Mortal Kombat Annihilation's contributions to video game adaptation history, but this shit sucks. This image of Shao Kahn's forehead becoming a 14 head may be the last thing I think of before I die, and I'm gonna be honest, that really scares me. I'll take a janky animatronic Goro that gets punched in the nuts any day of the week over this. And by the way, sidebar, I was watching X-Files last night, Colony and Endgame Season 2, freaking rad two-parter, and it's the first appearance of the alien bounty hunter who is played by Shao Kahn himself, Brian Thompson. And what does that guy do? He shapeshifts. So what, does Brian Thompson have like the most morphable face in Hollywood or something? Has somebody done research into this? I need to know, get at me. Anyway, Annihilation acknowledges the necessity of ending a Mortal Kombat movie with actual Mortal Kombat by having them undragonify midway through. This all really highlights some of the magic lost from the first movie. You'll recall that Mortal Kombat ends with an extended one-on-one battle between Liu Kang and Shang Tsung, which proves a satisfying finale for two main reasons. The fight was performed by Robin Shu and the late Cary Hiroyuki Tagawa, and the filmmakers took pains to put Liu Kang's character arc to the test after he spends the entire movie wrestling with guilt and self-doubt by having the martial arts stop here and there for Shang Tsung to test the might of Liu Kang's mind. Mortal Kombat II wholly embraces this line of thinking, with dual protagonists Johnny Cage and Katana each having to overcome demons in their past to go toe-to-toe with Shao Kahn and his forces. The Liu Kang-Shang Tsung fight is one of the earliest examples in video game movie history of a character getting a satisfyingly resolved emotional arc. And the Annihilation finale looks like one of those awful FMV cutscenes from a PS1 game, with the emotional depth to match. Misguided though the heavier use of visual effects was, it can at least be said that they were in service of expanding what was possible in the Mortal Kombat movies when it came to representing the games on screen. And for those of us with a soft spot for crappy visual effects, as a marker of just how far we've come, Mortal Kombat Annihilation is bursting with poorly composited dreamscapes that actually do a pretty good job evoking the feel, if maybe not quite the look, of the games. Mortal Kombat II is a much richer exploration of the game world by comparison. Without skimping on any of the visual splendor or impressive martial arts action, it treats the long history of the games with great care and economy. Mortal Kombat Annihilation's jabs at dramatizing an inherently silly mythology may not have all landed, but considering how much world building it was doing before the comic book movies of the 2000s provided a more solid playbook for doing so, they could have been a lot worse. And not to throw Street Fighter under the bus, but what am I saying? This is a Mortal Kombat video, you're gonna eat this up. This is a clip from the 2009 movie Street Fighter: The Legend of Chun-Li. Street Fighter went from this to this. This movie released in actual movie theaters 12 years after Annihilation, the same year as Avatar, and this was their big finale. We just didn't have it as bad as we thought we did with Mortal Kombat Annihilation, not even with lines of dialogue like this.
You're alive. Too bad you will die.
Mortal Kombat Annihilation is not even close to being the worst video game adaptation these days, and hell, it's not even the worst video game adaptation with Annihilation as its subtitle anymore. That ignominious honor goes to 2019's straight-to-video Doom Annihilation, a movie so bad that developer Bethesda put out a statement distancing themselves from the project before it came out. You will fail. I think of Mortal Kombat Annihilation in much the same way as how Star Wars nods to the prequel era in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Kenobi comes upon Nax, a downtrodden clone trooper who asks the Jedi to spare him some credits. He represents a bygone era which everyone was pretty harsh towards the first go-around, but with hindsight and a lot more variety of experiences to compare against, it feels like we were just a little too mean towards when you consider the new ground it broke and the scattershot quality that was to follow.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
So spare Mortal Kombat Annihilation some credit. It may not have been a flawless victory, but it's an important link in the chain of video game adaptation trial and error, at the end of which is Mortal Kombat II, a much better Mortal Kombat sequel, and the tip of the spear being launched by Scorpion into fans' chest cavities everywhere.
Get over here!
Thank you for watching. For more on Mortal Kombat, check out our review of Mortal Kombat 2 and my interviews with the folks that brought it to the big screen. For everything Earthrealm, Outworld, and otherwise, you are already in the right place. IGN.